Hi, I'm James McGuire, and on today's eSpeaks, we're talking about enterprise security and why conventional approaches really aren't enough these days. We'll take a look at some ideas that are working. To discuss that, I'm joined by Kris Lovejoy, Global Practice Leader for Security and Resiliency at Kyndryl. Kris, thanks for joining us today.
James, thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Absolutely, and of course, we've got a big 3-day weekend coming up this weekend. Are you ready? Is the barbecue grill all ready, or what?
I am excited. Yes, I've got a ton of family in, and we're heading off to the pool pretty soon.
Great. So let's talk about enterprise security. It seems like enterprise security really isn't keeping up these days totally. I mean, there's so much going on. There's all the endpoints to secure. There's zero trust. There's multi-cloud, distributed computing. Why are conventional approaches to security insufficient in your view? What's being missed?
Yeah, I think I want to answer this in a bit of a different way. And the way I want to answer it is I'm going to ask you a question.
Please.
I know you are involved in so many different conversations with so many different vendors, and they're providing you with lots of information, about the subject. And I just, sometimes I wonder, as you're sitting there and you're listening to, some folks talk, how do you, quite honestly, a lot of them are going to, in order to sell the capabilities that they have, they need to create a sense of fear. And so how much, when you talk to the vendors, how are you feeling about them? Are you feeling really frightened? Are you, how do you think about it?
It's a really good question. It's a central question, exactly what we're talking about now. I'm glad you asked it, because as I sit here, I think one of the problems is that the technology is extremely complex. And there's a lot of elements, particularly artificial intelligence. Everyone is sort of like broadcasting, well, we've got AI too. And the problem is, I don't really know, and the companies, the potential buyers don't really know, like, they have AI. You can't go out and kick the tires like if you're going to buy a car. You can look at the car, there's the engine, there's the tires. We don't know what the vendor says. When the vendor says, we've got AI and we've got this new zero trust model, they're like, we know what zero trust is, we know what AI is, but it's really hard for us to get underneath the hood and know exactly what's going on because it's so complex. There's not a lot of apples and apples exactly, because people are doing different, they're taking a complex technology and they're doing it in a different way. So as myself as a journalist, and I think that the buyers feel this too, we want to believe the vendor, so to speak, but we're confused and it's extremely complex and we're not sure what to do. And here's my bottom line on this is that when it comes to security, we are very scared because we know we're not really keeping up. The bad guys are really winning. And if some magic genie would just come to us and say, well, write this check and we'll make sure there's no problems, we do business with that genie in a heartbeat. But no vendor really is able to say, oh, we will solve all your problems, just write us a check. That hasn't happened quite yet. So that's my vantage point from where I sit.
And so I'm so glad I asked you that question, because that is, I think, when you ask kind of what's happening in the market, I want to flip it around and say, one of the challenges, yes, we do recognize that there has been a lot of digital transformation lately.
Right.
Everybody's transforming something, everybody's moving to the cloud, and in the process, like you suggested, there's no tires to kick, and in fact, most of the business owners that are buying these technologies, and keep in mind, like 80% of new technology is not bought by the CISO, right? The CISO doesn't have a hand in that. It's bought by somebody else. And the CISO. Pardon
me if I may. Who is buying? If not the CISO, who is buying it? Up above, or a lower person, lower rung individual?
It's above. I think about it. This is as whomever is the IT infrastructure owner who's leading the migration to the cloud. Right. What they're doing is they're brokering these engagements with the hyperscalers, and the hyperscalers are selling them capabilities, security capabilities, along with the hyperscaler. And maybe those are being implemented. Maybe they're not being implemented. Who knows? Right. Because the vendor says the seatbelt came with the car. They're not really sure about whether it's, sort of installed or not.
Right.
CISO's inheriting it and is being asked to check to see if it's compliant, right? By that point, they've already the car's out of the gate. There's nothing you can do there.
Right.
And so I think, one of the challenges that we have in the marketplace is exactly this complexity. And I think that a lot of it is because of the way in which we as security officers buy within an organization. And having been one, just sort of talk about this honestly, is we often will buy because there's a compliance trigger or there's been a crisis or somebody's worried about there being a crisis.
Right.
And it tends that when we buy that way, we buy the slimmest, cheapest possible product to solve that problem. And so as you're reflecting, every technology, right, was built for a particular use case that was this narrow.
Right.
Now, what's happened is the investors are saying, okay, this is really cool. You did solve this thing, but you got to build your sales, right? Because, $5 million ARR after you've raised 100 million, I'm sorry, you got to do something.
Right.
And so now all of a sudden they sprinkle the pixie dust of AI or right? There's like some pixie dust. And now all of a sudden they solve not only this problem, they solve this problem, and they solve this problem, and they solve this problem.
Right.
And so I think, part of the challenge is the way in which we have bought is because of compliance or crisis. We're not kind of a strategic acquisition, number one. Number two is we've allowed for this balkanized infrastructure of very specific tools to be implemented, very hard to connect together. And I think that, quite honestly, I think the market's overcapitalized. Like you're pointing out, people are confused. They don't know what to do. They don't know what to buy.
Right.
Does that make sense to you?
Well, I think you make a really good point in terms of the balkanized tools, and that it seems like there's a conflict in the industry between best of breed niche tools, and then some security vendors, many actually, will offer a platform, which in theory would pretty much really cover your bases. And so I think especially the larger enterprises need to go for that best of breed. And sometimes they've cobbled together 6, 8, 10, 12, 20 best of breed, and I'm not sure they can all interoperate because they developed by different people at different times. Or, I think companies long for that one all-encompassing platform. Just give me a platform that has the tools in it, then on the tools have been built to interoperate. That's what we really want. But that's a sort of major confusion in the security industry.
Right, and I think you're absolutely right. And there is that is, I think, the sad thing about it is when a lot of vendors talk about, move to our platform, we're going to solve these problems. It's move to our platform and use our tools.
Right.
Right. Any vendor, anybody who's buying is going to say, I don't want lock-in like that. I can't afford to be locked in. Right. I need to be able to switch out. I need to be able to use those best of breed tools. I need scale. I need to act now, particularly with these data sovereignty, data residency rules that limit the kind of data that can be collected within a geography, which means that you need to have people in the country using the tools to deliver the outcomes. So now all of a sudden you need to use more local tools that were written in the local languages, et cetera, that can provide that support. As far as like one of the problems, yes, security is bad. We're making it worse because we're not actually solving the problem. We're competing with one another. And I think that the messaging has gotten ahead of where the technology market is. And I really, really, really think we need to be focusing more on, as you're pointing out, the integration of these tools and the sort of the outcomes that can be derived, as opposed to, like can I buy this narrow thing to solve this narrow problem? Yeah, it ain't gonna work.
Right. Well, then, okay, I'll put myself in the shoes of these poor customers out there. They know that there's hackers and malcontents in every corner. A lot of it is funded by nation states. I mean, so the bad guys are really sophisticated. They really know what they're doing, and they never sleep, and they're well funded. But I, as a company owner, need to protect my company against all those negative forces. What advice do you give me? Like, how do I go to market and shop, and how do I protect my company with great enterprise security features?
Yeah, so I'm going to give you my very simple kind of recipe for where we are in the marketplace. Shift left, shift right, and level up in the middle. So let me explain what that means.
Okay.
Shift left means a lot of organizations now, and what I'm seeing, one of the major problems is we're moving into cloud, but we're not moving into one cloud, one hyperscaler.
Right.
We've got multiple hyperscalers, we've got SaaS applications, and we've got legacy. You need to be able to manage across the seams. And so where we're falling apart is organizations are buying the security capabilities associated with these individual hyperscalers. As I said, they've got that legacy infrastructure. They're cobbling together applications. They're using a lot of open source widgets, et cetera. What they're not thinking about is the seams between the hyperscalers and between the widgets in the frames, in the applications that they are building for cloud.
If I could ask a question about that, make sure I'm understanding you. In other words, there's a company out there, they're using Azure and they're using AWS, and they're not optimized for either. And of course, there's a space between Azure and AWS. Is that the problem, or is it between the company and the hyperscaler, or both?
It's both. It's both.
Yeah. Okay.
It's between the hyperscalers and the company is supposed to be the integration point,
right.
but they're not.
Right.
It's just another form of technology that they're managing differently. And what I'm seeing really, and this has been historic, is the security teams don't have good control of the application development lifecycle. And so shift left means you've got to have more presence in the DevSecOps, that lifecycle. You have to make sure that there is a set of policies that have been established that can be installed and implemented as code. So policy
okay, I'm confused again as a buyer. I'm confused because you're talking about control over the life cycle, but myself as a buyer has no control over the life cycle of the development of the product, right? All I can do is buy it or not buy it.
No, you do have. So this is the key.
Okay.
Whenever you buy you're moving to cloud, largely you're moving to cloud and you're doing one of two things. One, I'm going to just take my heritage stuff. I'm going to put it in a container and I'm going to put it in the cloud.
Right, lift and shift.
That's one, lift and shift.
Yeah.
The other is transform. I am actually going to migrate, make my applications cloud ready. Now, SaaS, right? I'm going to buy a SaaS application is the third.
Okay.
Now, if you think about number one and number two, number one, when I build that container and I secure that container, how I secure that container has to be consistent, no matter whether it's Google or Amazon or AWS. So that's number one. If I am going to actually build an application, right? I'm going to actually migrate, I'm going to refactor my application and move it to the cloud. Again, I am going to be responsible for stitching that together. I might be hiring application developers to do it for me, third parties, but I've got to give them the specifications for security and resilience so that they can knit that into the application.
Okay.
On the third side, on the SaaS application, keep in mind, just because you're buying a SaaS application, it's not just hosted within the SaaS provider's environment. There's also data, there's your backup, your disaster recovery. So there are going to be multiple ecosystems. So again, the job of application development today is largely an assembly job. It's not really a build job, it's assemble. And so security has to get involved in that assembly process to ensure that the seams don't represent like APIs. They don't represent a weak point, number one. Number two is that the policies that they establish, the controls that they use can be consistent across whatever environment. So that's like the most important thing. So that's right. Shift left. Shift right is totally the opposite. It's assume you are going to get hacked. Assume you are going to be breached. Assume you are going to have a ransomware event.
Right.
How long can you afford to be down? And where are you going to pull back good known data and good known system configuration? Now, again, CISOs, like with the application security side, they don't own disaster recovery business continuity, right? That's somebody else's job. Their job is to contain the malware. The business goes down, it goes down. That's, right?
Right.
So the problem is we keep running into these situations where customers are getting whacked by ransomware and they may be able to contain it, but they can't bring themselves back. So can you afford to be offline 30, 40, 50, 3 months, 50 days, 3 months?
No, there's no way.
So prepare to recover. So shifting right is get yourself engaged with the disaster recovery business continuity people, really understand what your business critical services are. Run through the playbook. It's hit by ransomware. Everything's locked up. Where am I going to get my data? It's not just about the data. Okay, you have to have a good copy of data, but you also have to know where's my system configuration and how do I rebuild this thing? And by the way, do I have an Active Directory I can lean on so I can begin to authenticate people? But you have to think within the context of, I have to know what my data and what my services are and how to bring them back up again in the order in which they need to be recovered.
Well, let me see if I think this is a really important point in terms of really engaging with the disaster recovery folks, because it sort of gives you leverage in that terrible day when the ransomware attack finally happens. You want to make sure you're tight with your ransomware provider, excuse me, with your disaster recovery provider. But and you've sort of asked, you've offered some questions to ask that provider. But what does it mean to be really up to speed with them? In other words, is there a test? I mean, can you be testing this on a regular basis?
Absolutely. And
yes.
I would imagine if I'm anywhere near financial services, that it's going to become an obligation to test your recovery very soon. This is not, people test recovery all the time. What they don't test is whether they can recover from a ransomware event.
Yeah.
It's a very simple problem. And so I think with some of the regulation that's coming out of Europe, the resiliency requirements, what we're hearing from the US Fed, this is going to become like a really big obligation for enterprises, is prepare to recover. Just know how to bring stuff back.
Okay.
So that's shift right. Now in the middle, right? What do you do in the middle? All the other stuff you've got. You know, I think that particularly now, I personally love recessions in so much as it gives the CISO the opportunity to take stuff out. Right? If you're a CISO and you put a tool in, God help you trying to go to the board or your executive team and saying, you know, that thing I spent money on, I don't need it anymore.
Right. No one wants to say that.
Nobody. So recession is a wonderful opportunity to say, we're going to massively simplify and integrate and orchestrate all this stuff. Use it as an opportunity to clean out your closet, to identify those key capabilities you need, how they need to be linked, and get rid of everything else. But I think to me, that's kind of like the level up in the middle. But those are the three things I would say. DevSecOps, prepare to recover by getting in touch with your BCDR folks, and then simplify in the middle. Now, all this means, what does this mean? It means that security officers, and I think this is another challenge, we've been talking about it for years, they've got to be more business oriented. Yeah, right? Your job isn't just to protect, it's to manage risk, business risk. You can't do that by yourself. You have to have friends. Go make friends. Go talk to people. Talk to the application security people. Talk to the disaster recovery people. Talk to the business people. Talk to the finance people. Understand what they can tolerate and help build the right level of control to achieve those objectives. But we're kind of off the reservation right now in some areas.
That is fascinating. It makes perfect sense too, the idea of reaching out to people, creating that network. I want to give you a chance to speak specifically to the Kyndryl solution, the Kyndryl Advantage. Why should companies choose Kyndryl? I mean, Kyndryl seems like it's a new company, yet it's kind of an older company because it was part of IBM for so long. And so is it a new company, an old company? I don't know, but it's a large company as far as I know. Tell me, what is the Kyndryl Advantage as I go shopping out in the marketplace?
Yeah, so Kyndryl is a huge company. So we're about 92,000 people now, growing.
That's pretty big. That's a big company. Yeah.
So we're, for those of you who don't know us, we are the spinoff from IBM. So IBM spun off their services, managed services and technology services business. So we deliver services to the market, and where we're focused is on those companies that are undergoing any form of digital transformation, any kind of digital modernization. What we do is we help them in migrating their applications and infrastructure to the cloud. That's one. Two is we help them in transforming their extended workplace environment. So, to allow for remote work from home, all of that, that's where we focus on. Three is we are focused on automating your operations. So automating things like patch management, vulnerability management, automating identity management, automating your just sort of your key front office, back office operations through into sort of intelligent automation. So we do, using AI and all that other stuff, we use that to help you improve.
Right.
And then fourth is security and resilience. We help you in sort of operating in this increasingly risky world, as you know. So those are the four things that we do. What's our advantage? Kyndryl, we come out of IBM, so we are a startup with 100-year heritage. We've got, of those 92,000 some odd people, most of them are technologists. They're engineers. They know how to put stuff together. They know mainframe, they know AIX, they know the hyperscalers, they know SAP. If you have technology, we've got somebody within the organization that knows how it works and how to manage it. And so what I would say is for anybody who has a problem in the area of, I need to optimize like how I'm using cloud. I need to do something about my workplace. I need to make my operations more efficient, or I worry about security or resiliency. That's what we do. And that's why, and you're looking for somebody who understands technology and how it works in business. That's what we do. We don't build software. We use other people's software, but our difference is really our people.
So it sounds like a company would come to you not for, they would come to you for an all-encompassing solution rather than one problem in terms of security. Correct or incorrect there?
Very correct. So we do, so talking about, sort of the, a lot of the resilience capabilities that, I was just talking about that shift right. We do a lot of that actually. So, a lot of financial services organizations will come to us and say, my core banking system, we're worried about the, the potential for ransomware. So what we want you to do is vault our data, and we want you to build the, sort of the on-demand disaster recovery capabilities. We don't want them on-prem, we want them in the cloud. And so we will help customers kind of understand what is the business critical process? How does it work? Like, where's the data? Where does it need to be maintained? How many copies do you need, right? Because you need kind of N minus X copies. What's the system configuration? What order does it need to be scripted? What's the trigger to make it happen? So we architect that entire solution. Then we can run, if you want us to run it for you, we can run it for you as well. Okay.
So I got the idea that Kyndryl, in short, Kyndryl has the answers and Kyndryl can help you out. Let's take a moment and look to the future, because I think companies are really looking to the future because they want to be ready for what's coming. If you look a few years ahead, say the year is 2025, 2026, somewhere in there, what is the enterprise security landscape going to look like then? And how can we be getting ready for it now? Some of the things I think you've already talked about, but what does the world look like then, and how can we prep for it?
So, you know what? I would ask you that question. You answer before I answer.
Yeah. Gosh, I think it's a really good, I think one of the things that you touched upon, and I think companies are already looking for this, and we talked about this, that they want and they need an all-encompassing solution. They don't really want the smaller tools unless somehow the smaller tools have fed through that larger solution. So they want one throat to choke, so to speak, because there's so much going on that they know better to think that, well, I'll pick this tool from this place, this tool from that place. They're never going to cobble together a really effective solution from a series of patchwork. It's just not going to work. There's going to be holes between them. So I guess I'm really hoping that more of the all-encompassing solutions grow up and we can do business with them and make them happen. In my less optimistic moments, I think the bad guys might pull further ahead. I think it's a difficult issue that they are really well funded. But I think companies are still only now fully waking up to exactly how bad it is. And I think they hopefully will wake up more and more and realize, security isn't just something we need to keep covered. Security is a main occupation for us. And I think if they do that, they'll be in better shape. If they don't do that, if they try to view it as like one other thing we need to cover, I think they're going to be in trouble because it's too big an issue.
Yeah. Can I ask, what do you think happens to the managed security services market? Do you think that people are going to want managed services, or do you think in this new marketplace, it's more about give me the platform and I want to put the people on to actually operate the tools?
I think it's going to be more and more managed services, my personal opinion, because the managed services folks have this expertise, and I don't want to have to be cobbling that myself. I'd rather just contract with them. You folks tell me you know how to take care of it. Well, all right, I'll give you a try. And if you do, good. If not, I'll find someone who does. But I don't want to be cobbling it together myself. I want to be hiring someone to do that.
Yeah.
That's my guess on that one.
Yeah, it's my interest. So I would say, in that one in particular, and I'm just going to stop, just comment on that and then come back to a few of the other things that you said.
Please.
On that one in particular, I'm kind of torn because I'm seeing it's like the path is forking. Companies where, like in financial services, we're highly regulated organizations who feel that it is an enterprise, cyber is an enterprise risk. They absolutely need to be best in class. I hear them saying, I want to insource this. So what they keep telling us is, you can build the platform for me. You can kind of operate the platform, but I want to put the people on top of the platform, the level 1, level 2, level 3. I want to operate it. So that's one fork.
Okay.
The other fork is less regulated. Exactly what you're saying. Just do it for me, right? I just don't take the headache away. Just do it for me.
Right.
So I have a feeling it's the guys in the middle. It's like either I want turnkey or I want just the platform. But the middle space is where I think, it's going to change a lot.
Well, it maybe it's a question of company size and company affluence. I mean, there's some companies at the very, very top of the heap that have so much cash that they can really afford to insource it. I mean, affording to insource it is an expensive proposition, it seems like. It seems like there's a lot of mid-level companies that they can't be thinking about insourcing it because it's just too expensive.
Yeah.
Agree, disagree?
Oh, no, I completely agree. I think it is definitely a question of maturity scale and sort of regulatory need. I think, the other thing that I see just from a dynamics perspective is, people don't realize that, the geopolitical situation does have a broad impact on cyber, not just, sort of the increasing of the risk, but the fact that we had a lot of nationalism and populism. And that nationalism and populism over the past few years has manifested itself in a set of cybersecurity and privacy requirements that are often bespoke for a particular market. And that is introducing complexity because a lot of these rules are about to hit the floor right now. And so my expectation is that, things are going to get hairier from a fragmentation perspective in the market before easier. And all of these things are going to sort of kind of change the dynamics of who outsources to whom and to what. But I think that some of the options are going to be limited just because some of these data sovereignty, data localization laws in particular are really fundamentally changing who you can source from.
Well, then, all right, that makes perfect sense. I guess my question is, in my little simple brain, is it going to get better in mid-decade, or is it we're still going to be like fighting this slogging fight that we're not really winning now? Or is like, I think somehow I want the clouds to clear. You know what? We kind of more or less figured things out, and we pretty much have it. There's still a few problems, but we pretty much have it taken care of. Are we ever going to get there?
Honestly, I have a feeling we're all going to be well employed for the next foreseeable.
Okay.
Anybody who's got a kid who wants to figure out what their major should be, bring him to cyber.
Really?
Jobs.
You'll never be out of a job. If you're a cybersecurity expert, you will never be out of a job.
Yeah, exactly. But I fear that things are not going to get much better, at least as far as I can say. I think all of the board level scrutiny, the C-suite scrutiny, that's really important. But I think this is international collaboration is going to be required a different mindset is going to be required, a different organizational structure within our enterprises to enable these business risks is going to be required.
Mm-hmm.
We're still in the very nascent stages of a market that's trying to deal with threats that we don't understand.
Right.
And so I do think that there is going to be some pain that's going to be had, before we can see the light of day.
Kris, I think you said it. That was an honest answer, and I appreciate it. And we've got some work to do, is what I'm really hearing. So I believe you were correct about that. Fascinating conversation, and thank you so much for sharing your insight today.
And yours as well. Thank you.